Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. I'm here to give my reaction review to episode 65. If you're watching this on Tubi, season 2, episode 30. I have a bone to pick with Tubi on this. Before I get started on the actual episode, um, Tubi, you need to fix this shit, okay? I love me some Leela Swift. I do. She is my favorite Dark Shadows director of all time. But there's a really big problem with your description here. You say Leela Swift directs this episode. She does not. She does not. John Sedgwick does. John Sedgwick is and by the way, I watched this 3 extra times to make sure I was correct. I didn't just I'm good. I'm good. Thank you though. I didn't just look it up, in the wiki. I watched the episode 3 extra times to make sure John Sedgwick directed this episode. And John Sedgwick does indeed direct this episode. Why the flying fuck Tubi has Leela Swift directing this episode when she doesn't? Again, I love Leela Swift, but Tubi, bitches, make sure you got the right director listed, okay? That's what I'm going to say to you. All right, here. I mean, it's not that hard. Look. I've called this out before about Tubi's description issues, okay? Because they have a description mess up for Willie Loomis. I'm sure those aren't the only 2 mess ups, but they 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 have they have a really big mess up here. It's it's just it really irks me. It really does. Like, how hard is it to make sure? You know what, Tubi? You know what? You guys aren't Dark Shadows fans because anybody would have fucking checked the episode. Fuckwads. All right. And this, now that I'm done my little micro rant there, um, there's a lot that goes on in this episode. We have, in the previous episode, Burke entered Collinwood by the end. And because Mrs. Stoddard Liz had heard a knock on the door, and she went to it. She thought it might be Roger, which I don't get why she thought it would be Roger or anyone else. She just thought it would be somebody. Oh no, she thought it was Matt. She thought it was Matthew knocking on the door. Um, I've seen Matthew just enter the house, but Liz thought Matthew was knocking on the door because Matthew had just tried to kill Burke. So, and who is it? Well, it's Burke Devlin. Burke Devlin enters the house as Liz, and right after Liz opens the door, and he's like, "Where's Roger?" And the episode ends. In this episode 65, it picks right up with Burke entering the house and talking to Liz. Where he's his consistent question, "Where's Roger?" Which I like. He's not home. Well, I'll just wait for him here. And Liz does tell him, please leave. Um, she's, this is my house. You're not just going to barge in here. And he said, Mrs. Stoddard, I love this line by Mitchell Ryan, and I love Art Wallace to pieces for fucking writing it. Burke says, Mrs. Stoddard, I did not force my way in here. You open the door and I'll walk through. And it's a really great line because it's true. When often enough times, the characters in Dark Shadows lines are moments of pure truth. They're not lies. We're gonna have lies. Look, I love Vicky. She's my favorite protagonist. She's lied in the beginning, in some of the beginning episodes, a little white lie. But it's fun to see a character sort of get down and dirty, and like, oh, you're not really expecting that out of the 20-year-old virgin, right? um, you know, it gives something in mind that I remember in John Carpenter's Halloween, and it runs hand in hand with Dark Shadows. Just because a character has innocence doesn't mean they're that innocent. Laurie Strode smoked a joint in the car with Annie Bracken. And nowadays, that's probably not a big deal to some. And in the 70s, I'm sure it was. I don't know. I didn't live during the 70s, but yeah, Laurie Strode did not want to get caught smoking a joint being a 17-year-old teenager. Um, you have you have Alexander in previous episodes lying about something, and it makes you appreciate the character all that much more. It lets you know, yeah, this character's innocent, but she's not that innocent. She'll tell a little white lie, um, which I appreciate. I don't mind. Like I've talked about this before. There are moments in the series you can tell Alexander could have played a baddie, no problem. Burke and Elizabeth have a really great interaction. You know, my buddy Patrick McCress talked about class in Dark Shadows. Once again, we have that little conversation here in this episode between Burke and Elizabeth. Burke is reminding Elizabeth, hey, I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I didn't grow up with all this money around me. My father had to scrounge around and make lobster pots for a living. And that there is so good because something we really get in this episode that I love a lot of is Burke talking about his dad. Um, and he's mentioned his dad briefly before, but this is sort of a reflection of Burke's upbringing as he's in a house that's not his. He's in a house that is owned by the wealthiest family in Collinsport, the Collins family. He's in a house that he could never afford as a child, or or his dad could even afford. And like I said, he just doesn't talk about his dad, bring up his dad with Elizabeth. He talks about his dad with Victoria Winters. I'll get back to that. And again, Elizabeth tells him, I could call the sheriff. And he's like, well, could call him. She doesn't. She does not call the sheriff, which I like. She lets it ride. That's one thing I love about the character of Liz. She herself, though she wants to believe her brother, is still curious about Burke's crusade here. She's trying to, even though she does tell him initially to leave, she realizes, okay, he's not going anywhere. You know what? I will make you will be my house guest. You want to be a guest at my house? Fine, I'll treat you like one. Which I really enjoy in this episode. It's really, really well done. Um, and I love the camera work of John Sedgwick here. Because the one thing I love most here, Burke, to my knowledge, in this entire episode, where he does sit down, but he is often standing and walking around. And I love that because we get these tracking shots of Burke. And so I love how Burke walks around in this episode. And the camera, though I get it's on a set, I get it's in the drawing room, and it's not exactly a large, big room, but it's a large enough room where you're following this character around when he's standing up and he's talking about, his man, Roger, how he wants to confront Roger and talking about his dad. I really appreciate them giving that here in this episode. I'm not saying they don't do it in other episodes; they do, but there's just something about it here that I really, really love. I can't place my finger on it. You'll have to go watch yourselves, and maybe you guys can tell me what you love about it. But it's something I really enjoy. Again, he does sit down, but he stands a lot in this episode and walks around. Um, they're basically doing a character tracking shot with Burke. And I would dare say, 65, because, look, a lot of episodes focus on Burke, whether he's in them or not. But 65 and 66 are definitely Burke Devlin episodes. Um, and I dare say, I don't want to complain, and I'm not trying to. 65 and 66 should have been together, like as episodes in DS. They really should have been, because in 66, what you're going to have in episode 66 is Vicky telling Burke, yeah, Roger didn't leave here. I believe that she believes Roger's time is accurate. Um, and her believing that is, in a sense, her telling the truth. She believes Roger's statement. She has no reason not to believe him, because by the time she did speak to him, it was 10:30. So, and she went upstairs. Could 10:30, 10:35? Could Burke could Roger have theoretically left 10 to 11? Sure. But he didn't. He left sooner than that. He left right after him and Vicky's conversation, but she had gone upstairs. In this episode, though, we go to the Blue Whale after this hefty conversation between Burke and Liz, and we get Roger Collins on the telephone at the bar. And who does he call? This is bold as hell. Now, he's called the Evans cottage before. Hell, he's asked around about, Sam to Maggie to her face. But calling here is very suspicious, especially after the death of Bill Malloy. And because he's trying to keep the alibi, him and Sam, that is. Roger and Sam are trying to keep the alibi of, hey, we didn't know what that meeting was about. And they tell that story precise. Their stories are very similar, and I've talked about that before. Calling Mac, to me, I love this here because this shows, we've seen Roger be desperate and take risk. I love the risk take here, but it does show how desperate it is. Also shows he's a bit foolish here for calling, because Maggie could easily go to the cops and say, look, he's asked around about my dad before, and Bill Malloy was alive. That's something Maggie could have did. So it's really interesting that again, Roger is still, trying to find Sam Evans. This time with a lot more reason behind it. So you have this. He asks Maggie this, and he turns and sees Sam Evans has entered the bar, and he's sitting at the bar table, the bar stool. He's sitting at the bar, I should say. And Roger sees us. He says, "Oh, never mind," and hands up. So he goes over to Sam Evans. He said, "Come sit by me." He goes, "You could sit right here at the bar with me." And he goes, "No, you need to come over for my peace of mind." And what I love most here, I love how Dan Curtis Productions and John Sedgwick, they literally have them sitting at a different table than what they sat before. What I mean by that is, the last time I saw Burke and Roger and the Blue Whale together, Roger and Sam at the Blue Whale together, they more sat in the back of the Blue Whale, and here they're sitting right next to the bar. They're not sitting at the bar itself. They're sitting at a table right across, like right by the bar. Which I love this. It's call me cynical, but I'm a sucker for something just a tad different than what you did before. And that little piece of, location of changing, and now you get a camera view of extras in the background, which you did before in DS, but to have it be a different table, I don't know, it felt so special to me. And what I really love most here is this game of chicken between Roger and Sam Evans. Sam says, "Oh, hey, you made an offer to me before. I'm ready to accept it." And Roger, like, oh, no, he withdraws. He goes, "No, that offer has expired." And because what what ultimately happens is that it's a conversation about Bill Malloy. They're both keeping up their alibi of the same thing that neither man knew. Because Sam has had a conversation with Burke, and he tells Roger this. He tells Roger he stuck to their story about they didn't know why Bill Malloy called them in, but he also told Roger here in this episode that he told Burke he did not kill Bill Malloy. So that means he's gunning for you, Collins. He wants your high, which Collins already knows, and he affirms that he knows. He goes, yeah, I know. It's one of those. And you continue the game of chicken because Sam refute when Roger says all that offer expired, and Sam goes to make a phone call. He comes back to the table, and Roger rethinks it, and he goes, "You know what? I'll give you the money. Just go ahead and leave." And Sam's no fool. Sam realizes, you're just trying to get me to look guilty. So no, I'm not taking your offer. And I like this here because Sam, sorry, Roger can't just go to the sheriff and say, "I offered Sam money to leave," and he initially accepted, because the sheriff would be asking, "Well, why are you wanting him to leave?" Again, you don't want to cast too much shade on yourself here if you're if you're Roger Collins. Um, Sam does a really good job. Again, both men, Lewis Edmonds and David Ford, are just two pros playing chicken with each other, and I love it to pieces on this episode. It's really good. It's like, who's going to blink first? And I love the fact that Sam Evans told Roger, "Hey, I talked to Burke. He believes me that I didn't kill Bill Malloy." But Roger one ups him and says, "Just because Burke Devlin believes you didn't kill Bill Malloy doesn't mean that I believe you." Um, and I love that line. It's a great way for Roger to leave Sam. Like, hey, you may have sold little Burke Devlin, that's all well and good, but you didn't sell me nothing. Um, and I love that. I mean, you could say it's heelish, and maybe it is. But here's the thing: I could see Burke saying the same thing about anybody about Sam. I think the reason Burke gives Sam the benefit of the doubt because I believe. Here's the thing: I believe Sam Evans too. Not because I know it's going to happen. Sure, I know that, but David Ford really sells his ass off in the episode where he's in Burke's room and he says, "No man has the right to take another man's life," which I agree with. I think that's a beautiful line. Yes, really, really great line. So again, it was a great way for Roger to leave things with Sam at at the house, and I'm just going to finish this all here. So I love how Elizabeth goes to prepare tea and has Vic, because Vicky comes and enters the downstairs and enters the drawing room. She asks Burke, sorry, she asks Vicky to entertain Burke, and she does as Liz leaves to make tea. I've talked about Burke talking about his dad to Liz, and that's where he talk. This is where he talks to Vicky about his dad and about how his dad struggled for lobster parts. His dad loved the ocean, but he couldn't go on a boat, and he couldn't go in on the sea, so he became a land lover. You know, me, Patrick, Allen, and Gordon had just did Solomon Kane. We talk about origin. This is great origin storytelling here in DS in episode 65. This should have been origins of Devlin's childhood, or the origins of Burke Devlin. That's what this should have been, because you do get enough here to understand why Burke feels the way he feels ultimately, in my opinion. It's the manslaughter charge. Yeah, it is the manslaughter charge and the manslaughter trial, but it's also everything too. Here's Burke. He didn't grow up with a silver spoon. He didn't grow up rich. He grew up. His father told him, "You got to work hard in life, but you got to also, when you see an opportunity, you got to take it." But he learned those values from his dad, but he also learned, there is a difference that nobody should be able to railroad. That's what he. That's what he ultimately was. And it's just such a great episode to hear this, to hear Burke talk about his dad and talk about how he saw his dad struggle to work hard and to get by with him and with the two of them. And Roger was his friend. Roger and Burke used to be great friends, and that whole incident, really divided them because Burke knows Roger lied. Roger and his wife lied. Um, I can't wait to get into the war rep of the Phoenix arc, because again, it's a great way to bring up the whole trial thing, right? Um, it is a supernatural story, don't get me wrong. Here in this episode, tea is obviously served by Liz, and you saw in the very first episode how Burke was very much attracted to Victorian Winters. There is some heavy flirtation going on between these two, and pretty heavy in this episode, and I love it to pieces. It shows you the softer side of Burke even more, and it shows you Victoria's interest. If you were wondering about Vicky's interest in Burke, I mean, it's one thing to be impartial, which Vicky tries to be very much so. This also shows you Vicky is interested back in Burke. If you had that question in mind, that question to me is definitely answered here by episode 65. You could debate whether it's answered earlier, because I would say it's one thing to just talk to somebody who you met and who technically is your oldest friend in Collinsport, as Burke says to her in a previous episode, which I love that line by Mitch Ryan. It's one thing to have that, but it's another to be honestly have two people to be attracted to each other, which you can really tell that here in episode 65. Great job by Mitchell, the late Mitch Ryan, and great job by Alexander Mulkey Isles. It's a great job, and greatly written by Art Wallace. And I love the way John Sedgwick shoots the two of them. It's really brought home here in every way. It's not, you're not concluding anything. With DS, it always feels like something is starting up with Dark Shadows, and that's another reason why I love this show so much. I love how when Vicky says, "What are you doing here, Burke?" and he says, "Having tea." Apparently, this episode concludes as the door opens, and Liz does excuse herself, and she closes the drawing room door, and it's Roger. And she goes, "We have a guest," and Roger's going up the steps. He's stopped, mind you. And he says, "Oh, who?" And she says, She says, "Burke Devlin," and you hear the music, and that's where the scene ends. It's a really great look, great facial expression by Lewis Edmonds. Great shot by John Sedgwick. I love how he shoots Elizabeth and Roger, because Liz isn't standing on the staircase; she's standing, beneath it, sort of on the side, looking up, and Roger is on the staircase, looking at her. It's a great shot. By the way, Roger still has his scar from the car accident. I know that's not really relevant here, but it's just fun to point out. So it was a great job by the effects department. Um, I just really love the camera work in this episode. The camera work has been something I've been really focusing on in these episodes because as I pointed out before, I do think the directors left their fingerprints on these episodes, and I think when you go back and watch, you can really tell where. Tubi, get your shit together. I'll see you guys later.